Okay, hello everybody, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and give everybody a few seconds to filter in to the into the chat here today. And in the meantime, like I always say, please feel free to enjoy this lovely slide and get excited for our chat today. Or how about you, Ben? Are you excited today?
I am so excited. I've been looking forward to this ever since we set this up. So I'm very happy to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, me too. And I think I have a feeling. I have a feeling today's going to be a great one.
I think so. Look, it's in our hands, Jenna, right? We control that.
It's in our destiny. This is our destiny, Ben. Okay, well let's go ahead and get started. My name is Jenna Quinn, and it is my pleasure as the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement to welcome you all to this edition of our 49er Industry Chats. So just a couple housekeeping items. We want to inform you all that this session is being recorded. And so what that means for you is that this is going to be available on demand on our website at www.csulb.edu/alumni for you to go ahead and review after the fact and share with everyone in your circle and forward it off to anyone who you may think can really get something from this today. And so since this is a webinar format, we want to encourage you all to use that Q&A box that you have at the bottom of your screen if you're here with us live. If you're not here with us live and watching a recording, catch us next time and catch us live next time. But hopefully the audience that we have here today will ask those questions that you may have. And so now with that, I am happy to welcome our guest speaker today, Ben Sieke. I knew I was going to mess it up. Ben Sieke?
You got it.
Ben Sieke. Hi, Ben.
Hey, Jenna.
So let me read your bio really quick, Ben. So Ben leads a hybrid team of learning and development professionals supporting employee development and career mobility for Delta Dental's diverse national workforce. Ben's resume includes experiences on the national and global learning and development organizations at Weight Watchers, Guitar Center, and MUFG Union Bank. He was also the president of the Los Angeles chapter of the Association for Talent Development from 2017 to 2019. Ben received his Bachelor of Music degree cum laude and studied industrial and organizational psychology at the Chicago School for Professional Psychology and became a certified master trainer in 2013. His passion for music has never abated, and he continues to work professionally as a musician in his spare time. Ben, thanks so much for being here today.
It is my pleasure, Jenna. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So let's just dive right in. Let's start with a little bit about your background. Before you came to CSULB, what was life and what led you to choose CSULB for your undergrad?
For sure. So I grew up in Culver City. I lived in Culver City for most of my life. Growing up, I lived in Long Beach for a year when I was in school. Then I moved back to Culver City and lived in the Bay Area for a year. Then I moved back to Culver City, and I'm in Torrance these days. But so I'm a Culver City guy. What led me to Long Beach? I was a very passionate, still am, right? A very passionate musician. And when I was in high school, I thought, I had started gigging a little bit and working around town as a drummer, doing a lot of like musical theater, orchestra stuff. And I thought, geez, if I could do this for a living, that would be awesome. And, I'm getting ready to go to college and pick a college. So I'm like, I want to be a music student. Let me find a good music program. I knew I wanted to stay local because at least at that time, knowing all about my future that I thought I knew when I was like 16 or 17 years old and making these decisions, I was like, I want to be a musician in LA, right? So I wanted to stay local. applied to a few schools, auditioned a few places, and the school that really spoke to me was Long Beach. It spoke to me not just because certainly there was like a vibe the first time I came to campus, and I was like, I like this place, right? Like,
campus vibes, yes.
yeah, right. And it's the vibe I still get when I come back, right? You know, when I try to go to some Long Beach basketball games. I love, shout out to Pizza Mania. I've been eating at Pizza Mania on the corner of, was that Atherton and Palo Verde?
Palo Verde, you got it.
You know, almost 20 years at this point. So a lot of it was the vibe of the school, and a lot of it was the strength of the music program. At that, and admittedly, I haven't stayed that close to the program, but at that time, it, for probably all musicians, but certainly for folks like for drummers and percussionists like me, it was attractive because we had amazing faculty and a program where it focused you on learning a breadth of different things, right? So in the same day, I would go from orchestra rehearsal to steel drum ensemble rehearsal, you know, at practicing drum set downstairs. So it was a place that, you know, as a prospective student, I looked at this and I thought like, oh man, I could learn so much here. And I did. So yeah, I made the drive, was it 30 miles down the 405 to come to Cal State Long Beach.
Awesome. Yeah, no, and then, you know, a lot of our students make that similar drive. So I mean, to me, it seems like a lot, like having to balance like going from one thing to the next thing in the same day, you know, when it's something so highly specialized. So I mean, it kind of leads into my next question, which is like, what was your student experience like? How was managing that? How was handling that?
So great question, and I could probably answer that in a few different ways, right? So the fun part, I made some amazing friends and built some relationships that I still have to this day. Like my best friend, was the best man at my wedding, also named Ben, by the way. I don't know how that works. We met, I'm pretty sure we met on the first day of freshman orientation. He was also a percussion student. We have the same major and a lot of the same classes. We had a real tight-knit group of students in the music department in general, that came from, you know, spending a big part of your job as a music student is practicing, right? There's a lot, you know, you're committed, especially if you're as I was, a performance major, right? So your goal is like getting really good at the things that you play. And I will not lie and say that I was the most diligent. I see one of my old teachers is on here. So I won't lie and say I was like the most diligent practicer of all of the students in the department. I certainly was not. But you know, we all spent a lot of time workshopping our instruments, and so you get to know people, spend a lot of time there. Folks that I'm in a 90s cover band, which is how, even though I've switched careers, music is still really important to me. Performing is still really important to me. All the folks in my band are Long Beach grads. A few of them are people I went to school with and played with when I was a student. So it's, even though it makes me feel really old to say this, it's been almost 20 years since I came in as a freshman. A lot of relationships with a lot of amazing and really cool people are ones that have stood the test of time, and people I wouldn't met if I hadn't come here. So that was a piece of it for sure. Academically, I loved college so much more than I liked high school. I I felt like the conversations were more interesting. The things we were learning were more interesting. Even the homework and the assignments were just like, I thrived. I was not a good student in high school. But yeah, I graduated with honors from Cal State Long Beach because it was an academic environment that suited me better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll give a shout out to, because he's active in the Q&A. Your old percussion instructor at CSULB, Dave Gerhardt, is on here. And so just want to give a shout out to him, and he's looking forward to this. So
Dave is the man, and always was. I'm sure he's not shocked to hear that I wasn't practicing as much as I should have. I feel like he could tell that.
Yeah, if anyone could tell, it was him, right?
Oh yeah, he must have known. But yeah, like he taught our percussion ensemble. He was my private lesson instructor for a while, and it gives me goosebumps. I wish I could see you, Dave. Like, I mean, if you're in town, we should have lunch or something. But like, I wish I could see you on here, because it's like I just have so many great memories of the people, including Dave, including my classmates that I got to spend time with while I was a student at Long Beach.
Awesome. We'll connect you. We'll definitely connect you again. But so a great student experience, things that lasted for forever. But ultimately, graduation day did come, right? And you did step off and go off into the world. So what was your first job after college? Like what was that first step? And then we'll talk a little bit more about your journey and what that looked like.
Sure. So I guess my first job after college was one that I had started working in college. So something just on a personal level, I've struggled with my weight for my whole life. When I got to Long Beach, I think I weighed 300 pounds. While I was at Long Beach, I lost 100 pounds. Through that journey, I found myself working at Weight Watchers. I guess to give back, right? I mean, it was more than just a job. Like, I really valued the support that I had gotten working at or as a customer at Weight Watchers, to help me, make better food and lifestyle choices. And so I had the opportunity to start working there part-time in school, which I did, and that was awesome, and it was rewarding. And so I went full-time after I graduated, while I was still trying to land, like what my real job was going to be, right? I had figured out during school that while I love music, being a full-time performer was not what I wanted to do. And I remember hearing, this was probably the first week of school, freshman year, our professor, the late, great Dr. Michael Carney, who led that program for a long time. I remember him telling us, not to like scare us or anything, but just I think to set expectations that like many of you are not going to go on to be professional musicians. And of course, I think a lot of us sitting in the room were like, well, yeah, they won't, but I will, right? Like I'm the real deal. Like this, yeah, for sure, it's going to be me. And I realized over time, right, that just and I have friends that are in people in my band, people that I went to school with that I'm still connected to, that are doing music full time. I realized that I love music, but I didn't have the passion to be doing that, 40, 50, 60 hours a week. And so, but I realized that halfway through a music degree, right? And and I was having fun, I was performing and all this, but that kind of had been in the back of my mind that I need to find something else to do, right? And I had this, when I was a little kid, I was very like entrepreneurial. Like I would, I had the lemonade stand, and I would like go to, I would go to Pick and Save at the time, Big Lots now, and like buy a bunch of inexpensive stuff and try to sell it to the neighbors and stuff. And I remember thinking just about like who I am and what I like to do and what would make me happy. And I remember saying out loud, and this was just sort of a thought in my head, I'm thinking, I like people. People are endlessly fascinating, right? It's a big, diverse world that we live in, and people are very interesting to me. And I've always been interested in business, and the thought just popped into my head, what about human resources? And I said that out loud, and my father happened to be nearby. And he was able, I didn't realize at the time how fortunate I was. He said, well, if you're interested in getting into HR, I have a friend that works in HR at Sony, which I was living in Culver City. Sony was like a couple blocks away, right? And so, he said, maybe I'll reach out to her and see if she wants to talk to you. And I was like, all right, cool. Turns out his friend was, at that time, the head of HR at Sony. So I had this amazing opportunity. I never worked at Sony, right? but I had this amazing opportunity to go in there, spend some time hearing from her firsthand, like, what do you do? What does your team do? What do you enjoy about that? And meeting some of the people on her team that did different things. And one of the people that I met was I forget what his title was, but he was he has the job that I have now, where he was like the head of training or the head of learning. And I just remember, I'm sitting down with this guy, I'm talking to him for a half an hour about what he does and what his team does, and thinking, this is so cool and interesting that this guy's job is like singularly about helping people build skills and get better at what they do. And from that point, I thought, like, this is something I need to, like, I'm excited about this. This is a thread I need to keep pulling on, which is something, I had some notes for this session today, because I was like, what do I want to make sure I touch on? And for folks that, I have gotten so much mileage in my career, both early on and later on in my career, from informational interviews, right? Spending time with someone solely for the purpose of learning about what they do. I've been surprised, I'm not surprised anymore, but I've been surprised more than once at how willing people are to just talk to you about what they do if you're willing to ask them. I'll throw it out there for folks that want to reach out to me to talk more about what I do and what HR folks do and all that. Like, I'll have the conversation with you. But I found that so helpful because, yeah, sometimes you're not sure if you want to do this kind of work or go in this direction, or you hear about a job and you think, oh, that seems interesting. What is that? And it was really that first experience with that informational interview at Sony that helped me recognize that this was a path I wanted to walk down. So at that time I was working for Weight Watchers, and probably within the next year or so, a trainer position opened up. And this is not like a personal trainer. This is like a corporate trainer, right? Like training people on how to do their job. And I applied for that and I got it. And that was the beginning of, I don't know how long it's been at this point, but that was the beginning of my HR career. And it started at a company I was already working at after I had figured out that was the direction I wanted to go in.
Awesome. And so I want to touch on a question that we have from the Q&A, but I also kind of want to tweak it a little bit to keep on with this. And so the question is, a lot of students go through music school and then wonder, what are they going to do when they graduate? And the question is, how did you transition to the corporate world? But I want to tweak that a little bit and ask, like, how was that transition into the corporate world, right? Because you went from, I think you were telling me you had this long hair and you were this kind of this metal kind of guy, and then making a transition to the corporate world from being like musician, right? How was that?
That's a really good question. I will say that I do still listen to metal, right? But my transition from being the long-haired, poorly kept metalhead that I was when I got to Long Beach, that happened while I was at Long Beach. And as you can see, like, nature helped me out with that. Like, it wasn't a sustainable look for me, for sure. So if you're okay with it, Jenna, I'd love to answer both questions, right? Thank you. So in terms of the what do I do, I think one of the most important things that I learned in college was that and man, this is corny, but I'm going to say it anyways. If you really want to do something and you commit yourself to it, you can. And I don't know how universal this is in everyone's college experience, because I think some of this really had to do with me as a music student. I showed up, knowing how to play some instruments okay, right? Like I thought of myself as a pretty good drummer. I could sort of play the marimba and the vibraphone, and I'd played timpani before, so I thought. And I remember freshman year, someone showed me, it was a graduate student, showed me how to actually play the triangle. And you might think to yourself, the triangle, like that thing you used to call people in for dinner, right? Like, how much can there be to that? a lot. And, I learned while I was there alongside my classmates, we all did this, how to play instruments that some of us had never seen before or ever heard of before. And not just to be able to play them at a basic level, but to be able to play them and perform. And, I think I have friends that are out there performing professionally on steel drum. And that is not something that they played before they got to Cal State Long Beach, right? And so one of the values that I took away that I use, in my role now as the head of learning for the organization I work for Delta Dental, people have an incredible capacity to learn. And so, yeah, if you're a music student and you're thinking, what do I do next? Or really anything, you'll learn it, right? And it helps if you're really engaged. And I think that goes to your tweak of the question, right? Like, how was it for me to transition into the corporate world? I found it pretty easy because I've always sought out work that I found interesting and fulfilling. And that probably sounds like a really dumb aha too, but I know there's a lot of people in the world that are doing work that they don't care about and that doesn't. And I'm not saying like every job I've ever done or all the work I ever do feels like life changing to me, right? But I will say, like, if how did I spend my morning at work? How am I going to spend my afternoon? On stuff that I find pretty interesting and engaging, right? And it's, I think, always, and it's different for everybody, but it's been really valuable for me. That's what brought me to Long Beach as a music student in the first place. That's what's taken me to where I am in my career now, doing the kind of work that I do, has always been chasing, what do I find interesting? Like, what can I see myself doing for 40 hours a week and not getting sick of it?
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, right, and gliding right into my next question, what does a typical day in HR look like? What is it to do 40 hours of this?
So that is a great question. And if there's, and I hope if there's HR people on this session that I'm doing justice to this, because it is such a varied, there's so many ways to practice HR. There's so many different jobs within the HR function. There are people that are, HR, we call them HR generalists. They can have a lot of different titles that spend their day doing all kinds of different things, especially if they work in smaller organizations. So like an HR person at a small business might be spending a part of their day trying to recruit people, a part of their day trying to onboard people, a part of their day, doing an investigation and interviewing people because something went wrong. They could be training people. They could be addressing a compliance issue. There's so many things that they could do in a somewhat larger organization. So Delta Dental, which I should give a plug for my employer, Delta Dental, we've got almost 4,500 employees. We are the world's largest private dental insurer. So we insure the mouths of 44 million Americans across the country. And in an organization like ours, which is not like a huge organization, but we operate at scale. In our HR team, people are more specialized generally. So they spend their whole day doing this type of work or that type of work. On my team, my folks are learning professionals. And so we are focused on helping people build skills and gain knowledge that help them do their job, and that can help them take their career where they want it to go. So build knowledge and skills and prepare them for a promotion or to move into a different role in a different part of the company. And so in support of that, we have people on my team that are trainers that spend their time teaching classes live or virtually. We have folks that are instructional designers. I mean, in some ways it's similar to parts of how the university are structured, right? We're focused. I think one of the big differences between the work that my team does and the work that happens like in higher education or in primary or secondary education is there are a lot of things I learned when I was a student at Cal State Long Beach that I learned for the zeitgeist or for developing myself. Like I'm proud to say I got an A in marine biology. I've never been a marine biologist. Yeah, I go in the ocean from time to time, but but it was like a part of my GE, because like we believe that as a part of your university education, you want to be a well-rounded person. In the corporate space, we're a lot more focused on building very specific skills that help you do specific things within the organization. So yeah, I have instructional designers, I have learning technologists on my team, that help manage the tools that we use to help people learn. And then I'm in charge of the department, and so my job is to know a lot of that stuff, and I've done some of those jobs at different points in my career. But I set strategy, I manage the budget, I make personnel decisions. So even though I've spent my career like doing the work, my job now is more about leading the work.
Awesome. And what would you say is the most challenging part of working in human resources? And then I like to ask that one first and then ask, what's the most rewarding?
Sure. So I'll answer that question in two ways. So it depends on what you do in HR. I personally have found that the most challenging work within HR is dealing with people when things go wrong. So I've spent most of my career working in the learning side of corporate HR. There was a time when I was at Guitar Center, which was also a fun intersection of my HR career with my love of music, right?
Yeah.
There was a time when I worked at Guitar Center where I was in charge of field HR for the Western US. And a big part of my job was conducting investigations and making decisions about termination when folks had done things that they shouldn't have done. There are people that are much better suited to that work than I was. Yeah, I'm very thankful for the people that do that work well and aren't as bothered by it as I was. I found that so difficult because even when folks had done something really bad that they needed to be let go for, like things that I don't regret at all to this day, it was very difficult to people have bills to pay, right? And so to make the decision that we're going to let you go, so there's some tough decisions and some tough conversations that have to be had in different parts of HR. And in some ways, that's not just an HR thing, it's a management thing. That's probably the most difficult part of my job today as a leader, even though I'm not doing that work all the time. And I have a wonderful team that I'm really thankful for. They do great work. They're amazing people. I still have to make difficult decisions and have uncomfortable conversations sometimes. And that's not why I do the job, but it's a part of the job. The thing that I like the most, and this I'll talk more about what I do and what my team does, is watching the light bulb go off, right? So I spent the first several years of my career as a trainer teaching people. And it was so incredibly rewarding. And I'm sure anybody who's on here that is a teacher in any part of the educational system, right? If you've taught music lessons, if you've taught kids in school, if you've taught at the university, to have somebody learn something and then use it and have that joy of, I can now do something that I couldn't do before. That's still what excites, like, even though I'm not in the classroom training anymore as a part of my career, when I hear those things from my team, when I see them, when we send surveys out and we get that feedback that people, that's what really warms my heart. It's a cheesy thing for an HR person to say that people are a company's greatest resource, but it's really true. And and I think it's true of every organization, right? What makes Long Beach a great place is the people that are in it, right? If we didn't have the great students, the great faculty, the great support staff across the organization, like, it wouldn't be a good school, right? It doesn't matter how nice the buildings are nice, the landscaping's great, but it's about the people, right? And yeah, that's what gets me waking up and excited about this work every morning, is that we've got 4,500 employees out there, all of whom all of us want to do well in our work. It feels good to know that you're doing a good job. And the role of my team is to help them do that, help them learn things, help them get better at doing things. So it's, I could probably go on about that for hours, but that is the most rewarding part of what I do and what my team does.
Awesome. Now you hear a lot, and I feel like I've been reading these articles and like hearing this on the news for like 2 years now. So I feel almost tired of it. But you hear a lot about like these popular buzzword phrases like the Great Resignation and quiet quitting and quiet hiring. What do you think? How do you feel about these kinds of things? Are they real? Are they things that have always existed? What's the deal with them, and how do they impact your work?
What a wonderful question, Jenna. So like, uh, they are real, right? They can be sometimes overstated or understated, but I think that's part of what makes work in human resources fascinating. Is it's about people, right? And people are not a people are, I don't want to, I shouldn't say people are a moving target, right? Because people aren't targets, but
I think I get what you mean.
yeah, right. Like, sentiment changes, people's expectations change, right? And so we've had conversations about the Great Resignation, right? Is that a real thing? And the answer is yes, but it affects different companies differently. And the big thing is to understand why and what you're going to do about it, right? Quiet quitting, right, is a new term for engagement issues, which I don't know what we used to call that before. We called it employee engagement. It was probably just not caring, right? But like, but all these things are like, it's our job. If we think about all the things that HR does in support of the businesses that we work in, we're trying to find and hire great people. We're trying to keep them engaged and keep them happy and keep them focused on doing great work. We're trying to invest in their development. We're trying to compensate them in a way that's fair, and not just in terms of the paycheck, but in terms of the benefits and the total rewards. We're trying to create an environment that allows them to do their best work. And ultimately, assuming that, that's all going well, we're trying to keep people too. And to try to make sure your experience is a positive one the whole way through. So your experience when you apply for work with us is positive. Your experience when you're new is positive. Your experience when you're here, and even your offboarding experience, like when you decide to retire or move on, what's that like? And so we do a lot of listening to our own staff, and I think most organizations have some sort of strategy for this, because like we read the news for sure, and we stay on top of the trends. And I think we all kind of ask ourselves, if this is something that's being talked about and being experienced in other places, what does that mean for our own organization and our own people? But we try to answer that by going to our own people, right? And and I'll give a quick example. I mean, this is not a hot take, right? The world has changed a lot as a result of COVID, right? Employees' expectations have changed a lot. You can see I'm here working from home. I was working from home before COVID, but in our company, a lot of people were not. There was a culture of everybody, not everybody, but most people are in the office all the time. And part of us navigating, obviously, COVID comes, and to do the right thing by our people, we send everybody home because we don't want people in the office getting sick from each other. But then we have to ask ourselves, when we start to have the ability to open back up the office, what does that mean, right? Like, do we bring everybody back in? Are we going back to the same way that we were doing things before? Do we keep everybody at home? Do we do something in the middle? Are we consistent across the whole organization in how we do that? Or are there different places where it's like, well, it makes sense for these people to come back, but it doesn't make as much sense for these people to come back? And one of our, and we're still working through some of those things, right? Because part of the cornerstone of how our company, how Delta Dental, and I think how a lot of other companies are handling this is doing a better job listening to our people, right? Where do you want to work from, right? Instead of this being a decision that has to always come down from senior leaders who are trying to make the right decision but have one perspective on an issue, when it comes to things like quiet quitting and the great resignation and the hybrid workplace and this and that and the other, our 4,500 employees have a different, they have their own feelings on this. There's things where they're going to be all on the same page. There's things where they're going to be in different pages. We have to ask ourselves, how do we be flexible? And the answers for my company might be different than the answers for Cal State Long Beach that's working through these things, right? So, and that's probably something that's changed over the last couple decades in this work, has been just an increased focus on listening, because if you're trying to answer questions about what's the best for your people, there's no one better to give you insight into what would work well for them than them.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to ask you about your band that you're in, and how do you do that whole work-life balance? How do you work in HR and be a rock star in HR and take care of all your people, and then also be a part of tell me about your band.
You're very kind, Jenna. I don't know if I'll ask my boss if she thinks I'm a rock star in HR. But I think that I'm like everybody else, where I have a diverse set of interests, right? And it was important to me in seeking out, what work I wanted to do for a living, to find something that was going to be really interesting to me. But music has also always been interesting, right? And so I think it's changed at different times over my career. When I first got out of college, I was still taking a lot of the gigs that I got when I was in college, and I was just, because a lot of music happens at night, right, or on the weekends. So like, it wasn't always, it depended on what it was, but it wasn't always that difficult to juggle those things. It has been a huge blessing in my life to be able to. It's probably been 8 or 9 years that I joined this 90s rock cover band with folks from Cal State Long Beach, including Abby, who's in the band, who was one of my classmates. That I knew these folks, right? And it's music that, forgive me, did I break up there for a sec?
Just a sec, but it was kind of cool. I'm gonna say it
All
was
right, cool. It's music that I grew up to. It's, I learned playing the drums to 90s rock. And so, our shows are at night and on the weekends. And so I have a very understanding wife who lets me put time towards that. But yeah, I guess it was another thing about just following my passion. I had always wanted to be in a band that played that stuff. And then when the opportunity came along, I always say it scratches the itch, right? Because I didn't stop pursuing music as a profession because I don't like music. I stopped doing it because I didn't think I wanted to do it full time. And so it was like finding that right, the music I want to play with the people that I want to play it with, in a way and at a level that felt good to me. And so, and shout out to, I'll shout out to my band. We are playing in Long Beach at Shenanigans this weekend. What is that? The Saturday the 8th from 2 to 6, down at Shoreline Village. So if anyone wants to come and rock out to the 90s with me, I will be there. We can also talk HR in between the set. Whatever folks want to do.
I'm sold.
All
I'm
right.
there. That's awesome. Yeah, no, and hey, if anyone out there wants to see that, I'll see you there.
I'm here. First drinks on me.
Awesome. So Ben, what would you say is one thing that you wish somebody would have told you when you were a student or recent grad?
Ooh. You know, that's a really good question. Maybe it's the importance of experiences. Like, I'll be happy. I won't lie. I'm happy when I look back at my career. It's had ups and downs. I was fired from a job at one point. That was not fun. So I won't say everything has been like the perfect journey, but I'm pretty happy with how it's went. I think that, recognizing that, yeah, the experiences that you have along the way are critical to your future success. There's a concept in at least the corporate learning space, something that's called the 70-20-10 model of learning, that says that 70%, like when you think about the stuff that you or I are good at, 70% of the reason why you're good at it came from experiences experiences you have doing it, right? Very few people are really good at something they've just done one time or just done in one place, right? Tom Brady had to throw a lot of passes, right, growing up to become Tom Brady. And so, I think for I feel old saying for young people, right? But if I could talk to myself, when I'm in my 20s, I think it's both recognizing the importance of experiences. For this is why it takes a while for your career to develop, right? Because as smart as you might be, as much as you think and we come out of school armed with tons of information. What we often don't have a ton of is experience applying it. And that doesn't have to take 30 years to get, but it goes hand in hand with the formal learning that we have, right? So I think one is embracing that. Another piece related to that is seeking those things out that, sometimes you have to create. If you want to get good at something, you have to put yourself in positions where you can get good at that. I think halfway through my career, I took a position, I mentioned this earlier, when I was in the role of Guitar Center, as their field HR leader. That was my first time working in HR outside of learning and development. And I had an academic understanding of that work. I had an understanding of it because I'd worked closely with other people in HR that did it. But I intentionally sought that opportunity out because I was like, look, for where my career might go, if I someday want to be a chief human resources officer or a chief people officer, I need to have experience doing stuff besides the work that I've been heads down doing for the last decade. And so, yeah, recognizing that it's not just about how much you know or how long you've done it for. It's about the experiences that you've had along the way, and that's really how you gain mastery.
Now we are getting close to time, so I just want to give you the opportunity. Do you have any final thoughts, observations, recommendations, words of wisdoms that you'd like to impart on your fellow 49ers that are listening in?
Yeah, a couple, right? And forgive me if you hear my dog barking in the background. She's passionate about this. So one is when looking, so sometimes HR gets a bad rap, right? HR gets a bad rap as boring, or HR gets a bad rap as being like the office police. That is certainly not true. It can be true in certain places. I would argue that that's not going well in those places, right? I've always found it to be a fun and interesting kind of work to do, and a fun and interesting department to work in. I've worked in specialty retail. I worked at Guitar Center. I've worked at the bank. I've worked now at an insurance company. I know that there are folks that get really focused on, I want to work at the kind of company that allows me to do X, Y, Z, or I want to work in a place where I'm fulfilling my highest mission. I would challenge people, not that that's a bad thing to think, right? But I would challenge people to really think about the nature of because it would be easy for folks to say, well, like, Ben, you work at a dental insurance company. Like, how interesting can that be? And I would say, oh, it's very fascinating because my job is working with the people at the dental insurance company, right? And we have 4,500 diverse people with different needs, and those needs change and all that kind of stuff. And like, yeah, if I was working for, Guitar Center, right? Like I'm a musician, I loved it, it was a great environment. I didn't find that any more or less engaging because it was the work I was doing that I found really interesting, right? So there's that. I've changed jobs at different times. I think something that I've always held on to as a value is that loyalty is a two-way street. There are people that can stay in jobs too long because they're waiting for something to happen that might not happen, right? I think, and I think that as an HR leader too, it's my job and my team's job to earn the loyalty of our employees, right? Our employees don't stay here because they have to. They stay here because they're choosing to. And we can make our company a place where folks want to be at by making sure that they have great leadership, making sure that they're rewarded well, they're doing work that they're interested in, they're supported in the ways that they need to be supported to be successful. And if you're, as an employee, not feeling that way, that might not be the right place for you. Don't stick around for 10 years to figure that out, because, especially now in 2023, I think every year it gets easier to go somewhere else, to a place where you're going to be engaged. I'm fortunate to be really happy with where I am, but if I wasn't, I'd leave, and I think that's an important lesson, right? Like someone will hire you somewhere to do something that you will be great at and you will be engaged in. Don't stay somewhere where that's not the case and where you can't see that happening. And then I guess last thing, right, on just for anyone that wants to continue the conversation, like I hope folks can tell, like I'm just so passionate about the work I do. I'm really passionate about Cal State Long Beach. Just had such a great experience there. So many dear people from there. So if there's any way I can be of service to folks that are listening to this, you can reach out to me. My email address is bsieke@delta.org. You can find me on LinkedIn. But happy to do an informational interview. Happy to chat with folks. Career mobility is one of the things I do for a living, so I'm also happy to chat with people about that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ben. I think that this has been a very, very good chat. For those of you who are logged on right now, Alana did go ahead and drop Ben's email address in the chat, so feel free to hit him up. And yeah, so thank you, Ben, so much for this really truly engaging chat. And we look forward to seeing everyone real soon. Ben, if you could stay behind, and we'll just say goodbye to everyone here who's logged in. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Yep. It's just us now. And